You're welcome to this channel. My name is Akinwale Akindia. I'm still continuing on the series on international standards on auditing. Today I'll be speaking on ISO 230 audit documentation. Okay, we have other standards that we've already uh, explained in the channel. So if you have not looked at the presentation on ISO 200, ISO 210, ISO 230, you can check the channel for you to be able to get those materials. Other training on auditing and assurance will soon be dropped in this channel. So if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, kindly try to do so now. Okay, so let's go to the business of today, which is a ISO 230 audit documentation. All right, you cannot be talking about audit without referring to evidence. The justification for an audit opinion or audit conclusion is the audit evidence provided. And a lot of time, the audit evidence is available in the form of documentation. All right, so let's look at the scope of this standard. This international standard on auditing deals with the auditor's responsibility to prepare audit documentation for an audit of financial statements. So like I said, you have to provide evidence, okay, for the audit opinion, okay. I think you know that there's a video that I've already done on the 5 components or 5 elements of assurance engagement, and one of them is evidence, another one is report. Okay, so you have to write your report based on the evidence you have gathered, and those evidence must be documented. Okay, the appendix of this standard lists other ISAs that contain specific documentation requirements and guidance. So, like I keep on saying in all these auditing standards training, that you cannot pick a standard as an auditor and say that is all you want to comply with. So, documentation, we have to look at other standards also and check their specific documentation requirements. Okay, the specific documentation requirement of other ISAs do not limit the application of these ISA. Law or regulation may establish additional documentation requirements. So you have to look at the country of the entity, also look at the legal environment, look at the regulatory environment for you to have enough documentation. All right, nature and purposes of audit documentation. Audit documentation that meets the requirements of these national standards on auditing and the specific documentation requirements of other relevant ISAs provide evidence of the auditor's basis for a conclusion about the achievement of the overall objectives of the auditor. So you have an audit objective in the beginning of the audits, okay, and at the end of the day, you are going to provide a report to show that the audit objectives have been met. So the evidence that yes, you have achieved your audit objective will be documented in your audit file. Okay, then B, evidence that the audit was planned and performed in accordance with ISAs and applicable legal and regulatory requirements. All right, it will also be found in your documentation. Okay, auditor's liability is a very interesting topic which I will soon drop in this channel. So, like I said, you need to subscribe to this channel if you have not. Okay, because a lot of educational materials are in the pipeline. So, you could be sued as an auditor, okay, by relevant stakeholders. How do you defend yourself? Okay, one of the ways to defend yourself is documentation. Okay, to show that you have not been negligent, you have followed professional, you have exhibited professional due care, professional skepticism, all right, in the course of the audit. So that is why documentation is very important. Okay. Audit documentation serves a number of additional purposes, including the following: assisting the engagement team to plan and perform the audit. Okay, so even in audit planning, you need documentation. For example, by the time you are trying to what we call characterization, you're trying to characterize the organization you are auditing on their business processes or their services or their technologies. That characterization might throw up need for specialists. all right, which you may or may not have in your team. So maybe you will need an auditors, what we call auditors experts, the kind of resources you will need. Okay, so documentation of the business processes, documentation of audit objectives can actually help you with audit planning. Okay, assisting members of the engagement team responsible for supervision to direct and supervise the audit work and to discharge their review responsibilities in accordance with ISO 220. All right, so of course, ISO 220 is the standard on quality management in audit engagement. So when you document, it also helps you to be able to know as a senior professional in your different to know where maybe things are likely to go wrong, where your team members, all right, that are not as experienced as you are likely to make mistakes. So you want to identify those pain points, all right, in your documentation so that you will be able to subject these areas to more in-depth review later. Okay, enabling the engagement team to be accountable for its work. Okay, so we have documented by, reviewed by, authorized by, everything is documented. So it helps us to be able to track who did what in the course of the audit. Retaining a record on matters of continued significance with future audits. So we have recurring audits. So if you get a job, an audit engagement that's a recurring one, of course you want to have it's not every year you'll be gathering certain information, all right, which are supposed to be in what we call your permanent audit file. All right. So for example, incorporation documentation about the client. It's not every year you'll be asking for that. All right, as long as they don't change. So you want to keep those records, all right, for continuing purpose. Enabling the conduct of quality controls reviews and inspections in accordance with ISPC 1 or national requirements that are listed as demanded. So your documentation is also an evidence of quality management. So you also want to retain that as evidence to anybody that want to inquire about your quality management system. All right, enabling the conduct of external inspections in accordance with applicable legal, regulatory, or other requirements. For example, in Nigeria, I can't do visit, auditing firms. All right, review their audit documentations for to see whether they are complying with with the standards and with the ethical requirements. So you need to keep these records for external inspectors. Okay, so let's look at the objective. The objective of the auditor as regard this standard is to prepare documentation that provides a sufficient and appropriate record of the basis for the audit report. Like I keep on saying, you're going to write an audit report at the end of the audit. You have to provide evidence to support your audit opinion and audit conclusions. All right. B, evidence that the audit was planned and performed in accordance with the ISAs and applicable legal and regulatory requirements. Like I said, things sometimes can go wrong in an audit, and you start having litigations, and people are asking for for redress in the court of law. How do you defend yourself that you have done the right thing, all right, that you have planned the audits and you have executed the audit in line with the auditing standard? It is your audit documentation that can help. So the standard also have certain, it has a paragraph for definitions. All right. For example, you define audit documentation. Audit documentation is described as or defined as the record of audit procedures performed, the relevant audit evidence obtained, and conclusions the auditor reached. All right. It's also called work papers, or auditors working paper. So for some of us that are going to be writing professional exams like ICANN, ACCA, all right, so you could be asked a question on these: what is audit documentation, and describe or define audit documentation. So the standard have defined that for us. So it's basically the record of the procedures we carried out, all right, the record of the audit evidence and the conclusions we reached. Okay, audit file. One or more folders or other storage media in physical or electronic form containing the records that comprise the audit documentation for a specific engagement. That is your audit file. Then the standard also defines what we mean by experienced auditor. All right, an experienced auditor, according to this standard, is an individual, whether internal or external to the firm, who has practical audit experience and a reasonable understanding of audit processes. The person understands audit processes, all right, understands ISAs, National Standard of Auditing, and applicable legal and regulatory requirements, understand the business environment in which the entity operates, and understand auditing and financial reporting issues relevant to the entity's industry. So this is what makes an experienced auditor according to this standard. All right, so paragraph 7 of the standard, timely preparation of audit documentation. So paragraph 7 says the auditor shall prepare audit documentation on a timely basis. So you don't wait too long, okay? Your audit planning is documented, your audit execution is documented, your audit reporting phase is documented. So this has to be done on a timely basis. Form, content, and extent of audit documentation. Paragraph 8. The auditor shall prepare audit documentation that is sufficient to enable an experienced auditor. All right, remember we have defined what we mean by experienced auditor, having no previous connection with the audit. So what we're saying is that your audit documentation must be such that it is self-explanatory. All right, even if you are not there, all right, and your audit file is passed to maybe ICANN or maybe a committee in IFAC, the National Federation of Accountants, or maybe, all right, you have a jury made up of accountants or people with financial background. They should be able to understand it. That's what that paragraph 8 is talking about. So they should be able to understand the nature, timing, and extent of the audit procedures performed to comply with the ISAs and applicable legal and regulatory requirements. They should be able to understand, without you being there, the results of the audit procedures performed and the audit evidence obtained. So you can't be writing in shorthand. And if you write in shorthand, you must have a section for key abbreviations and something like that where you explain everything. Okay, significant matters arising during the audit and conclusions with their own, and significant professional judgment made in reaching those conclusions. So what we're saying is that, all right, your audit documentation must be self-explanatory. Anybody that is experienced in auditing should be able to pick your audit file and be able to read it and understand how you arrived at your conclusions. Okay, so that's what paragraph 8 is talking about. Paragraph 9, in documenting the nature, timing, extent of audit procedures performed, the auditor shall record the identifying characteristics of the specific items or matter tested. Identify the audit area clearly. B, who performed the audit work must be documented, and the dates such work was completed too must be documented. Who reviewed the audit work performed? We talk about review now, I say 220, all right? So who reviewed the audit work, and the date and extent of such review must also be documented. Remember, we said one of the objectives of this documentation is to ensure accountability. We can trace who did what or who did not do what was supposed to be done. All right? So paragraph 10 now talks about the auditor shall document discussions of significant matters with management, those charged with governance, and others, including the nature of the significant matters discussed and when and with whom the discussions took place. So if you have discussions on significant matters with those charged with governance, those discussions, results of interviews must be documented in the audit working papers. All right, paragraph 11. If the auditor identified information that is inconsistent with the auditor's final conclusion regarding a significant matter, the auditor shall document how the auditor addressed the inconsistency. So if you find an evidence that is completely not agreeing with your auditors, with your final conclusion, then you need to document it. All right, maybe along the line, we have the books have been prepared on going concern basis, but along the line, somebody just throw up to give you and maybe a kind of suspicion. We talked about professional skepticism. Now this company might not exceed the next 1 year. You have to document it, all right, and now you address that inconsistency. So that is what paragraph 11 is talking about. All right, departure from relevant requirement, paragraph 12. If in exceptional circumstances The auditor judges it necessary to depart from the relevant requirement in an ISA. The auditor shall document how the alternative audit procedures performed achieve the aim of that requirement and the reasons for the departure. Of course, you're supposed to follow auditing standard, but what you're saying in this paragraph 12, that is possible. Of course, it's possible that there may be a situation where, what the standard is saying may not be applicable, all right, which is not supposed to be too common. But one a very good example is where national law clashes, all right, with the requirement of an international standard. We know there is is just there. Laws of the country are supersede the provision of the standard. So in a case like that, if the national law say do it like this, right, and the standard is saying do it in another way, you have to follow the law. Okay, so you have to document, all right, the alternative audit procedures performed and the reason, the justification for not following the international standard. All right. Paragraph 13 talks about matters arising after the date of the auditor's report. Matters arising after the date of the auditor's report. Paragraph 13. If in exceptional circumstances, the auditor performs new or additional audit procedures or draws new conclusions after the date of the auditor's report, the auditor shall document the circumstances encountered. So you have already submitted your auditor's report, but it's like some new lights are now coming right after you have submitted. So you have to document the circumstances encountered, the new or additional audit procedures performed, audit evidence obtained, and conclusions reached, and their effects on the auditor's report. So that also have to be documented. How the new evidence, the new procedures, all right, how the impact they have on the auditor's report, when and by whom the resulting changes to audit documentation were made and reviewed. So all these must be documented in case you perform additional audit procedures after you have submitted the auditor's report. Okay, assembly of the final audit file, that is paragraph 14. The auditor shall assemble the audit documentation in an audit file and complete the administrative process of assembling the final audit file on a timely basis after the date of the auditor's report. Okay, paragraph 15. After the assembly of the final audit file has been completed, the auditor shall not delete or discard audit documentation of any nature before the end of the retention period. So retention period of audit file varies from country to country. So you need to know the retention period for your country, and once you have submitted the auditor's report, you have collated your final audit file, you cannot delete it. You cannot destroy it until the expiry of that retention date. That is very, very important. Okay, paragraph 16. In circumstances other than those envisaged in paragraph 13, where the auditor finds necessary to modify existing audit documentation or add new audit documentation after the assembly of the final audit file has been completed, the auditor shall, regardless of the nature of the modification or addition, document the specific reasons for making those changes. All right, and when and by whom they were made and reviewed. So if you have to change, to modify the auditor's final audit file after you have submitted the auditor's report, you need to tell us exactly what you changed, who changed it, who reviewed the change. All right, that is what that paragraph 16 is talking about. It's just to ensure that people don't go and be modifying auditors documentation after the job is done. That is very key. All right, so that is the end of the standard, even though there is what we call the application and other explanatory material, which are basically supporting the main requirements of the standard. So I looked at those application and other explanatory material. I see some information that are very germane that can help us. So I tried to pick those. So 8.2, form, content, and essence of audit documentation, which is meant to strengthen paragraph 8 of the standard. So 8.2, the form, content, and extent of audit documentation depend on factors such as size and complexity of the audit. All right. So the extent of documentation you will gather depend on the size, the complexity of the audit client. Okay. The nature of the audit procedures to be performed, they identify risks of material misstatement, significance of the audit evidence obtained, nature and extent of exemptions identified. The need, all right, to document a conclusion or the basis for a conclusion not readily determinable from the documentation of the work performed or audit evidence obtained, then the audit methodologies and tools used. Okay, so all these are considerations that will determine the extent of audit documentation. Okay, then we have 8.3. Audit documentation may be recorded on paper, allowed, or electronic forms. Right? Either you can use a soft copy or paper. Examples of audit documentation include audit programs. The audit programs, audit analysis we have done, okay, issues memoranda, summaries of significant matters, letters of confirmation and representation, right, checklists we used for the audit, correspondences including email concerning significant matters with management and those charged with governance. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of this presentation on the standard ISA 230 audit documentation. So once again, my name is Akwali Akudia. If you have not subscribed to this channel, kindly try to do so as I produce more audit videos for this channel. Thank you.